1. This one is from when I was younger, and while I was not too old when this happened, I remember it pretty clearly. One day in the summer, I'm pretty sure it was a Thursday because that was trash day, I was home with my mom and younger brothers. At the time I was probably about 9 or 10, making one of my brothers around 8 and the youngest 4. We had been outside for the majority of the morning playing wiffle ball, hide and seek, and climbing trees with the neighborhood kids. Our neighborhood was always very family friendly and considerably safe. So much so that people left cars unlocked and front doors open. We rarely saw someone walking that we didn't know, and our parents all around felt okay letting us roam around. On this day in particular, I remember it being extremely hot, and after being out all morning, the noontime sun kicked in, and we all went to our respective houses to eat and cool off before resuming for afternoon playtime. As my brothers and I had settled on the couch to watch some Disney show, our front doorbell rang. This in itself was unusual, as all our friends would go to the back door, and even most delivery men had learned that we never used this door. Because of this, our standing rule was that only adults could answer this door, as it was usually salespeople or strangers. My mom went to open the door and saw a man standing there. He began peeking in our door as if trying to see past her. She politely asked him what he was there for, and he replied that he was looking for her son. I remember this man jumping around and being very antsy, wringing his hands back and forth in a nervous manner. Now looking back, he was probably on something, but at the time I didn't know exactly what was wrong with him. Nothing looked wrong. He didn't have anything physically wrong that I could see, and I was confused as to why this older man, probably about 40, was looking for one of my younger brothers. He told my mom that he had seen us playing outside and wanted to get his ball back from my brother, saying he stole it from him. At this point I saw my mom slide the lock shut on the screen door. It wouldn't have done much to stop him if he wanted to come in, but it was enough to demonstrate to him that she had no intentions of letting him in. He looked at her and said, "Oh, so you're not going to show me your son? Well, he stole my ball and I need it back. Tell him I'll come back tomorrow." At this, he proceeded to walk away, and my mom shut the main door and locked it. Then went back to the door and locked that as well. Earlier that day, the trash people had come to take our large trash bin's contents, as well as the smaller recycling bin's items. The recycling bin was long and wide, but short, and green with little symbols on the side. I remember my mom watching him out the window, and me, the oldest and therefore secondary defender of the family, going over to look for myself. This man proceeded to sit in our recycling bin, grab a stick from our yard, and begin a motion not unlike rowing a boat. My mom yelled out the window to him, "What the hell do you think you're doing? Leave or I'm calling the police." The following is an approximation of the conversation they had. Strange man: "This is my boat, and I'm taking it home." Mom: "That is not a boat, it is our recycling bin. And you have to leave it here. This is your last chance before I call the cops." Strange man: "Call them then. I want my ball back. Your son needs to pay." At this, my mom did call the cops and told them what was happening. They said they would be coming by shortly. I think the man must have seen my mom on the phone because he quickly jumped out of the bin and started dragging it along the sidewalk, hurrying away. When he heard sirens coming near, he dropped it and ran. The police said since he didn't take anything, there was really nothing to do. They said they would keep an eye out for him and drive through the neighborhood a few times. I don't think they ever found him, though, as we heard nothing more about it. That evening, my mom let my brothers and I invite the neighborhood kids over to play video games, watch movies, and eat pizza. Then, it was an awesome thing. But now I know it was because she didn't want any of us playing outside. The man never did come back the next day, leading me to believe he was just delusional or on some kind of drug. Either way, I'm glad he didn't try anything with my family, and I hope we never meet again. 2. This is a true story, and it happened when I was about 5 or 6. When I was younger, my parents were always cops. About this time, however, my mother was a paralegal. This is just under an attorney, but they piss people off just as much. and my father was a police officer. I have a hard time remembering how long this took place. Being a child, it felt a lot longer than it actually was. We believe the man followed us home from the grocery store, but my mom truly believes she had to have pissed him off in some other way in her profession. She had no idea who this man was and does not remember ever seeing or talking to him. We lived 45 minutes to an hour away from town on a lake, so him finding our house could never have been a coincidence. Now, how my house was set up. We had a driveway getting to our garage the back way, and we had a driveway getting to our house the front way. In order to get to the back to the front without going through the garage was to go around the entire yard on one side or to go through snake-infested weeds on the other, if that makes sense. The front driveway had a door to the garage to get into the main door, or my sliding glass door to my bedroom. From my bedroom was a door to the living room, important for later. The back way had a door that came off onto a large porch and the driveway, connected to my aunt's driveway a few hundred yards. We walked to her house to play with my cousins every day. So this all began with my sleeping in my room and slight tapping on my sliding glass door. The tapping grew louder until I woke up. I am already a light sleeper, and being about 5 or 6, I was already paranoid about monsters and ghosts. I woke up to a man, seemingly large man, standing at my sliding glass door tapping and looking in. I screamed. My parents came in and he was gone. This started happening every single night. It ended up turning into a daytime ritual as well. He had to have had a police scanner and knew when my dad was at work. No one had actually seen him to make a description, and I remember the police department was at our house every single night. Response time wasn't good, obviously, but down the road was my dad's cop buddy Fred, and I am pretty sure my uncle was either a cop or a jailer at the time, and again, their house was connected to ours by our driveway. And let me tell you, my uncle is a big mofo. He could easily pass as a member of a biker gang. He wasn't as big back then, but he was still extremely intimidating. I can't give you the events in chronological order as they are all jumbled, but I remember my mother was waking up to a tapping on her window. This was odd because there was an entire shed-type area under her bedroom. It was at least 2 stories off the ground. He managed to climb our tree and jump onto her AC unit that was in the window and watch her from it. I don't know what happened after that specific incident. Either right before this, or right after this, my mom was in the post office grabbing our mail. A random man approached her and said, "Do you know who I am?" She was confused. It had to have been before the major stuff started happening, because my mom is incredibly intelligent and she would have easily put 2 and 2 together. She looked at him briefly and said, "No, should I?" She went to turn around and leave and he said, "You will. You shouldn't have represented my wife." And by the time she turned around to get a good look at the man or ask him what he meant, he was gone. She was shaken. I am not sure what activity specifically took place after this point, or maybe a few days later. I am working strictly off my memory and my mom's. It has been 20 years, so some things are easily forgotten. I do know that there had been a time where he was at the front door and Mom snuck us up to my aunt's through the back door. He thought we were still inside, and if he hadn't, he wouldn't have caught up to us before we made it to my aunt's house, because of the layout of our house. I was terrified, though. So scared he was going to jump out of the trees and kill us. A couple nights later, however, I will always remember. We drove my dad to work, and once we got there, my dad climbed in the very back and laid down. Fred ended up dispatching with my dad's number and signing in as my dad. Dispatch was in on the plan, and everyone knew he had a police scanner. Nothing eventful happened until late that night. My cousin Danielle spent the night with me. I was no longer allowed to sleep in my room. I had to sleep in the living room. Now the door to my room was open. The sliding glass door locked up, obviously. There was a small walkway we made between our wraparound couch and our wall, but once you entered that door, you were in the living room. So anyways, we were watching Annabelle's Wish, and sometime we fell asleep. I woke up to the tapping and frantically woke up Danny. We peeked over the back of the couch, and sure as shit, there he was. It looked like he was tapping on the glass wall with a rifle. But at this point I was young and didn't get a good look, so it could have been a chunky stick. We panicked and speed crawled to my dad's room. We didn't want him to know that we saw him because we wanted my dad to catch him. Dad jumped out of bed in his boxer briefs, threw his vest on and grabbed his gun. My mom signaled for my Uncle Fred. They were there in a matter of seconds. I do not know how she did that because up there none of us had cell reception. So maybe house phone. We could see Fred, Dad, and my uncle frantically looking for him. My mom spotted him standing by a tree, and my uncle was only a few feet from him. He saw my uncle, but my uncle didn't see him. My mom tried signaling my uncle, but by the time he saw my mom, the man ran for the boat dock. After this night, it all just stopped. He disappeared and we never saw him, to our knowledge, again. I don't know if my mom would have recognized him or not if we passed him in the store. It is a very unsettling thought. To the guy who briefly haunted my childhood, let's never meet again. 3. This is really weird, and I would say a close call. When me and my friends were about 14 to 15, we used to go camping in the woods by our houses. A place called the Punchy that was pretty close to an old church and a graveyard, but far enough away to not creep you out. Well, anyway, we used to take 2 tents, and obviously not telling our parents, we would steal beer to take with us. This one time in particular, a few girls from school came with us too. Naturally, they had lied about where they would be. Anyway, story goes, we were getting drunk and playing dares, typical teen stuff, sitting around a fire with logs as seats that we had found. It's getting pretty late, and so some people had gone home, but there was still about 4 boys and 3 girls, including myself. It's dark now, about 10 p.m., and we had split up into the 2 tents. We were still drinking and generally playing dares that revolved around kissing or telling truths. This is when I hear footsteps coming from the trees outside the tents. I found this weird, and so stuck my head through the opening. Nothing there. This weirded me out, but I forgot about it after about 5 minutes. Then it happens again. I look, nothing. This begins to really weird me out. So I ask if anyone has noticed, and they say no. So I'm thinking, I'm drunk, and hearing things. Next thing I hear something brush against the tent. If you've ever run your finger along a tent, then you know the distinctive sound it makes. You'd recognize that sound anywhere, but the tent had like 3 sections, so I couldn't see it move. Like it wasn't the section we were in that had been touched. At this point, everyone else had noticed this too, and the tent goes silent, like you could hear a pin drop. And it stayed silent for about 2 minutes. Now, if you've ever been in a situation like this, the silence is deafening, and it feels like breaking the silence will have dire consequences. My friend goes, "Did you guys hear that?" We say yes. "Well, what was it?" I say branch or something. Because I didn't really know what to say, but I wanted to say something. We stick our heads out the tent, and once again, nothing. I was certain someone was out there, though. I just got that gut feeling you get. When you know, you know. And I felt like I knew. The tent was in the middle of the woods, but it was inside a clearing, and there were no branches anywhere near close enough to have touched the tent. Also no paths, so nobody would have any reason to be nearby. We carry on believing we were going mad. Then out of nowhere something hit the tent, like pretty hard. We gasp and back up to the side of the tent opposite the opening. Not that it would have done any good because it's a tent. I realize something is definitely up and grab the bat we used to hit the pegs in. I can't remember what my friend said, but I remember it being something to do with it could be our friends that left pranking us. It put me at ease, and I agreed, so me and my friend left the tent, laughing and asking our friends to show themselves. But no one did. I found this weird because, it was like the jig was up, and they'd had their scare. I walked over to the next door and told my friend who was in there with his girlfriend. that the other guys had come back and are pranking us. So don't be shocked if they do anything weird, and that they were being assholes. He agreed that was likely. We went back into my tent. Then my friend in the tent next door, which was only a few yards away, said he was going for a piss and if he could borrow the flashlight. I threw it outside the tent and carried on talking to the others. About a minute later he pops his head in and asks for the flashlight again, and I said I just threw it out for him. He said he didn't see where it went because he was throwing clothes on while inside his tent. We assumed the flashlight had rolled away. So we had a little look and didn't find anything. I found it so weird because there wasn't really anywhere for it to go. The ground was fairly level and I couldn't see it rolling anywhere, not to mention it was bright green and would have obviously stood out. So I lent my friend the lantern and said be quick because we would have no light. And I don't like the idea of no light considering things were getting weird. And tried to convince him to piss without the lantern, but he wasn't having it. He walks off and we carry on talking. There's 6 of us in my tent at this point, as my friend's girlfriend didn't want to be alone while he went. Next minute my friend sticks his head back in the tent and says, "Hey, I'm not fucking kidding, but there's a guy out there." I thought he was fucking around, but I panicked, because if it was our friends pranking us, surely we would have heard them laughing or something by now. I stuck my head outside the tent and no one was there. But my friend said they were standing just beyond the tree line, and my friend looked so scared. I took his word for it at this point. The girls were panicking, and I didn't really know what to do at this point. We whispered among ourselves who should go and ask this guy what he was doing here, and if our friend was seeing things. So we agreed 3 of us would go. We took the little bat and walked to the tree line, and sure enough, this guy was just standing there. He had long, messy hair and a beard, but was slim as anything, and dressed in camo gear. My friend asked what he was doing here, to which he replied in a weird and blank manner, "Walking." We asked why he was walking in the middle of nowhere, and if he had been by our tents, to which he replied, "Them tents ain't yours." This guy was fucking weird, and he was creepy as anything. Just his expression. He then walked off into the woods, and we were deciding whether or not we should go. We decided we should leave, but it was dark, and it would have been hard to find the way with only the lantern. We decided to sit on it, so we all got in my tent to wait it out. About 2 hours passed and we couldn't sleep. Next minute I hear like an unzipping noise, and this creeped me out because it was coming from my friend's tent. And we were all in my tent. Everyone starts whispering, "What the fuck is that noise?" Me and my friend stick our heads out the tent, and there's nothing there. So we decide to all go and look, like 4 of the boys. So we walk over to the tent and my friend gasps and says, "We need to fucking go." I walked round the other side of the tent and it's been slashed open corner to corner, from behind. And inside the tent was the little green flashlight. Now this made me freak because A, we knew this guy wasn't playing around. He just busted an expensive tent. And B, he had something sharp to cut the tent fast without it tearing. We walked back over to the other tent and got the girls and most of our stuff, and left. We started walking towards the road through the woods. The most fucked up thing about it is every so often you could repeatedly hear, whispering, but rapidly and repetitive, but not loud enough to figure out exactly where it was coming from and what it was saying. It felt like an eternity that this guy could have been anywhere. After 35 minutes we get to the road and follow the road home, because we didn't want to tell our parents we'd been drinking. Walking home takes 2 hours, and we were looking around us the whole way. Next day we go back and the tents are gone. True story, a few weeks later, someone we know from school got chased by a weird guy wielding a knife not far from where we were camped, who had camo clothing. So he must have been crazy or something, rather than it being a drug-related thing. This fucked me up for a good while. I stopped camping, and the only other times I've been camping is festivals where there are people. I am by no means a coward, but this guy was obviously nuts. And nuts people do nuts things. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 311. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I just realised I've kind of been doing a lot of camping-themed stories recently. It'll remind me to never actually go try it myself, I suppose. Well, I tried Beat Saber this weekend for the first time, and my arms are very achy. I kind of got into it. So that should be good for getting the body moving, I suppose. I did try it briefly on expert mode, and while I was doing well on normal, I don't think I'll be trying expert ever again. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.